O'Brien continued. The trip aboard the Hawk was silent, as the only individuals within the compartment were O'Brien and Vorta, who seemed to squirm nervously one space from him. The gentle rumble of the craft was subtle as the low hum of its engines was felt through them down to their bone, but he sat silently with his demeanor hidden behind his helmet's purple visor. Agonized by the silence, Vorta sought to quell the quiet compartment with mild conversation. "So, why are we visiting another ship?" she said meekly. "To visit someone," he said vaguely. He still wondered how Zuna found out about Vorta when he made no mention of her, and his mind swirled because of it, but it only resulted in one response. Why? He grumbled loudly as he thought of a reason, but as the ship jerked to a halt and the side doors opened, the pilot spoke curiously on the sudden order for transit. Sir, we're here, but can I ask what for?" "I'm going to need to report this to my CO," he said cautiously, picking his words careful against the man who could very well kill him and take his ship for a spin. Or so he thought. Searching for a viable answer, he replied, "To interrogate the target before they transfer him back home. Use that." There was a pause, but understanding was made with affirmation. "Of course, sir. I'll return at the end of the reprieve period." O'Brien lifted from his sit, followed by Vorta, and disembarked from the side ramp as the engines began to hum in preparation for takeoff, eventually leaving himself and Vorta in a bustling hangar. They were still present as flight operations continued, and were subsequently shuffled away towards the main exit from the landing zone, where they were paused by an individual in scarred and bloodied armor that had yet to be clean. His name was unreadable from being worn out from blood and dust, but a red band crossing both of his pauldrons and a centered stripe running down his helmet was seen, indicating his non-commissioned officer status. "Sir Sergeant Trisco, it's good to see you again." "Likewise," replied O'Brien as he motioned them to follow. The sergeant continued, "The CO mentioned your arrival but ordered the reason for your visit as classified even to us." There was slight scorn in his voice, seeing that most raiders of his caliber or higher were usually privy to the happenings of fellow raiders, but he couldn't exactly tell him the reason for his visit, that even the workings of officers were beyond the need of his enlisted. "It's a personal matter, so drop it," O'Brien said sternly and with authority. With practiced habit, Trisco ceased his query, no longer interested. "Of course, sir." But as they moved throughout the ship, silence took them briefly even while the corridors of the ship still reverberated with a wealth of life and fervor of sailors, marine, and raider alike. "Trisco, I heard about your detail some time ago. I don't think I ever got the chance to pay my respects properly. To your squad and my men." "Thank you, sir. But even we weren't expecting an ambush like that either. Caught most of my men with armor off during rest," recounted Trisco as they continued through the many halls of the large ship before entering a personnel elevator containing only the three. "I saw the video. They took the VIP, but I have to say, you did right giving them the send-off you did. But the only question we have is what did they do with him?" mentioned O'Brien. Trisco shook his head with a sigh. "Wish I knew, sir, because if I find him next time he's eating lead." It was a sentiment they both shared, after reminiscing the loss of his soldiers from an attack that left Trisico as the sole survivor among the security detail. He continued, "By the way, I came across one of those large ones, big enough to knock me out with its tail alone. What the hell was that? It's called a Runion, and the Secretary General passed an order to kill them on sight. So next time you see one, don't wait, just shoot." Trisco returned with a smirk. "This'll be fun," he said, as the elevator rang with a pleasant tone before opening to a silent and dimly lit floor. The air shifted greatly compared to the common decks, and instead of a wealth of enlisted, only officers, senior enlisted personnel swarmed these halls, with expressions of a stone-cold demeanor and hardened focus. "This is where we part ways, sir. The commander made it known of your visit and authorized your access. I'm only allowed entry within the elevator. Just take a right all the way down the hall to the bridge." O'Brien nodded as he and Vorta departed, with a small and shallow ding ringing out before the doors closed and the bright light from within failed to escape. The sounds of silent work continued as they followed Trisco's directions, eventually leading them to a door guarded by two raiders, who quietly spoke to one another as they approached. "I'm still upset we were on watch for the op. Hey, I heard from one of the guys that this station was full of Selly slaves," spoke one. "Yeah," returned the other, "but Trisco said we're first pick for the next one. From what I heard, we're far from done.
Oh, hell yeah!
I missed the one in Atlas with that walrus that talked shit against the big CO, added the first.
Oh, I remember you were out sick.
Damn shame, finished the second, but halted upon seeing the figure of O'Brien and his guest. Seeing the colored band of gold enveloping his arm, they stood at attention and rendered a firm and snappy salute, which he promptly returned. Sir, we heard you were coming by. The commander is waiting for you inside, the second said curtly, before turning glance towards the shrunken Vorta, who used O'Brien as a visual shield against the armored individuals. I didn't know you were beginning a guest. Ma'am? Added the second as he scanned her for rank before falling on the single star with a medium-sized inverted chevron, indicating her rank of ensign. O'Brien returned with a quick and stern reply. Commander Wolf mentioned privately that she wished to meet her during the next port, but I expedited that process. The two looked to tone another before moving aside, creating room for them to pass, before opening the door on their end. Similarly, the bridge opened up to a low drum of activity as orders were passed between one another in a moderate conversational tone. It continued as they approached up a small set of steps, where a young woman with ash-platinum hair sat overlooking a holographic display table that was surrounded by other officers. Their eyes remained on the display, entirely ignoring his and Vorta's entrance. The topic on hand looked to be current affairs and planning, with a young woman of fair skin, black hair, and eyes addressed the group. The name on her uniform indicated the individual as Yamato, and by her rank insignia, indicated she was a lieutenant. We're going to need to divert most of the fleet back towards Atlas to escort the VIP we just took on, with several others. What about the AEU? Questioned another from beside her, sharing the same insignia as the former but whose name was Jadari. We still have orders to be able to provide them with emergency fire support. They're only a command corvette and destroyer. Quite lackluster if you ask me. A shred of understanding was shared between them, as their mission parameters shifted greatly from comfortable standards. But before they could identify an answer from among themselves, an attention-seeking cough erupted from the commander in the high throne, Commander Wolf. We can offer the bare minimum to act as emergency support, since this team is more than equipped for the missions ahead. How does 2 heavy frigates and corvettes sound, Captain? She said with a seductive emphasis. The sudden tilt of her head and address caused her subordinates to look towards the direction of her words with curiosity, causing their eyes to grow wide at his presence. But their eyes landed not just on him, but also on the exotic alien that was dressed in their uniform. Caught off guard from his presence, the lieutenants were ready to reprimand the 2 guests for their intrusion, but were promptly halted by the rising of Wolf, who met the captain with captivated eyes and wide smile. My, I didn't think you'd show up so soon. Didn't you have patrols to oversee? Her tone was seductively voracious, as if ready to strike like that of a viper. Luckily for me, I have staff sergeants to oversee that kind of stuff. Delegation is a wonderful get-out-of-work card. O'Brien met her tone unconsciously, low and gruff, that he began to ignore their surroundings, but a cough from Zuna's executive officer forced them to return to from their own world. Well, look at the time, 1900. Guess it's time to wrap up. We'll continue this in 70 hours before the end of the reprieve. See you all tomorrow at 7. Zuna turned back to him as gave their pass down, urging both O'Brien and Vorta through a set of doors with a silver star. It had significantly less foot traffic than before and reserved only for officers and the senior-most enlisted. Trailing behind, Vorta paced behind the pair as Zuna spoke closely to O'Brien, actively restraining herself from locking her arms in the open, and instead resigned herself to the locking of her own fingers behind her back. I know I said I wanted to meet the little vixen, but I was expecting to meet her during port call. Zuna began, eyeing Vorta with a silent, sidelong glance. We got done with our mission and she just happened to be on the return trip. Figured I'd make it a 2-in-1 trip. After entering through a set of doors, the group was met with lavish furnishings contrary to the rest of the ship. They had wood vinyl floors, patterned walls with dark wood furniture and leather seats. Near the entrance, a chrome buffet arrangement sat ready and hot with a handful of plates and silverware ready for a handful of individuals. To O'Brien it appeared that it was prepared for them exclusively. Zuna noticed his silent analysis as she grabbed a plate and fork and began to choose her food. Welcome to my personal galley, an area reserved for me, the XO, and Admiral, if he ever shows up. The rest usually go down to the officer's galley a couple of decks down. O'Brien copied her, grabbing a plate and utensils as he began to fill his plate with double the amount of food compared to her, which matched only 1/5 of his plate. Nervously, Vorta followed Zuna in the amount of food she took, as she asked the silent culinary specialist what each item was. "Do they not feed you to the Reaper?" Zuna chuckled as she made her seat and took a small bite of her food. "They do, but even I'm rationed. I'm barely getting by even with all the snacks they put out in the chow hall," he answered, as he took a large bite from his plate with a look of heavenly satisfaction. "Gotta make it work when we don't get enough resupplies in deep space." Zuna nodded. "Command doesn't want a mistake like last time, so I have to make sure the VIPs get back home safely," she said in a dejected tone, knowing that she was likely the one to head its efforts. O'Brien could tell that their time apart tugged at her, especially if he was going to continue his mission beyond the arm, and with her returning to Sol system to ensure proper transfer. "When you get back, give my folks a ring. They miss you plenty," he said assuredly. The three continued their meal, with O'Brien and Zuna exchanging the small happenings in between their mission before she landed upon Vorta like a hawk who zeroed its prey. "So, Vorta, O'Brien here told me he met you during his time on Celia." The atmosphere grew heavy for the two, as O'Brien continued to take advantage of the quality and quantity of food before him, leaving the two to talk as he continued to indulge with his food like a starved wolf. Yes, that's right. It was too late to enter the bunkers, and I believe the city was at its end, so I decided to wait and see." Vorta continued, recounting her time atop her home as the sky grew plagued by ships, gunfire, and explosions, before ultimately being detained by one of O'Brien's subordinates, eventually almost meeting her fate at the hand of her own brethren. "But it was Captain O'Brien who saved not just me, but Sergeant Dare as well," she said, turning to the man in question who remained oblivious to their conversation. "I owe him my life twice over, but because of him I wish to join your republic." Her eyes longed towards the man who sat beside the commander, receiving the same glance from Zuna as she rested her chin upon her wrist. "Well, I commend your spirit, Vorta, but I have to say, he is mine," she said, shooting a golden glance towards the timid Vorta. I don't know what you mean," she replied softly, with subtle nod from O'Brien as he silently acknowledged their relationship. "You know very well what I mean, but I can forgive you, if you let me touch your ears." The item of discussion had caught her off guard, and Zuna's eyes followed them as they danced up and down from what she expected to be embarrassment. She gave a shy nod as she made her way around and began to see for herself the alien features that she relegated only to fantasy and science fiction novels. It was an act that she had quickly indulged before turning to O'Brien to also see for himself, but turned it down. "Not my kind of thing. Besides, she looks mildly uncomfortable." But with a wave of dismissal, she urged him to come forward after gaining a small nod of coy approval from the person in question. It was as he expected, soft yet rigid like cartilage near the base that thinly led out towards the tips of her ears, which was met with a soft fur for the tips. Knowing how it would look to the rest of the crew, they ceased their actions. "Apologies," began Zuna. "Looks like I got carried away." The atmosphere between them lulled from growing embarrassment before she called for their conclusion. "Looks like it's getting late. Captain, is your station awaiting your urgent return anytime soon?" She shook his head. "Just as long as I get to interrogate the captive, I'm here for the whole reprieve." It was an answer she was looking for, and with eyes of a dilated predator who found its prey, she called for their nightly retirement. "You can start in the morning, Faye," she whispered. "I hope you have plenty of stamina saved up." He looked to his mounting of several plates and gave her a knowing smirk. She then turned to Vorta, who until now remained silent. "I've arranged a room for your stay, dear. It's a stateroom beside mine that's never used. Follow me, I'll show you." Her tour was expedited as she was shown her room and provided the bare essentials for hygiene before being left to the room for the night. Normally there would be a lengthy process to get the room, but Zuna had gained its key beforehand as a precaution and emergency for moments like this. As such, she was sly in her delivery of the room key to Vorta before tugging O'Brien by him arm through her door. "Well, good night, Vorta. Don't let us keep you," she offered before fully sealing door, and the corridor returned to an eerie silence. Within the room, O'Brien was quick to begin detaching his armor in a practiced motion, as they landed on the floor with a thud until he reached his final layer, one that was removed in tandem with Zuna's own. With breathing growing heavy and their hearts pumping ever faster, They indulged late into the night, unfortunately ruining the slumber of their closest neighbor. The author, Vex Trooper, is taking a short break, but rest assured, we'll bring the new chapters as soon as the author makes them available. If you enjoy the story, make sure to follow Vex Trooper on his subreddit. The link is in the description.